Fáilte Rash gan Nematon. Lughnasa is a celebration of the start of the harvest season, transitioning from a time of little to a time of plenty. It is when the goddess of the soil, having put her energy into the crops, the trees, the grasses, begins to weaken and die away in exhaustion from the massive effort. It is a time when Lu battles the Favoiri for control of the produce of the earth, sometimes manifested as thunderstorms. The correct balance of weather is required for crops at this time, and he brings the needed rains as well as the sunlight and fine weather. It is a time of remembrance, respect, and mourning for the toils of the earth, for which Lu holds commemorative games in traditional Indo-European style, with horse racing and competitions. Cuchulainn refers to it as a time of sadness, for it is the beginning of autumn as recorded traditionally, and the beginning of the decline of the sun and the life energy of the earth in the northern regions. It is also the time when Lu is crowned king, just as Zeus in Greek myth overcomes his father Kronos, associated with generation of crops. Lu overcomes his grandfather Balor, the propagator and sower, who germinates the seeds, but who now wishes, like the irresponsible peasant Lu calls him, to keep all the produce for himself, to drag it back down into the underworld by burning it with his withering gaze, causing blight or rust in the crops, a serious problem that can ruin an entire harvest. Blight is often brought on by an excessive amount of hot, wet, and humid weather. The Greeks and Romans associated the star Sirius, the dog star, as being a primary cause of these conditions. Yet overly hot and humid conditions are often driven off by strong winds and thunderstorms. Lu breaks the grip of Balor through sending the winds and the lightning to drive off the damp, humid heat of Balor and allow the direct sunlight to dry the crops, just as Zeus is said to send the winds to dispel the powers of the star. He is a force of balance, neither a storm god akin to Tyrannus, nor purely a sun god, but a sky hero or shepherd, closely aligned with the sun, who masters the abilities required for ruling over the earth and ensuring life. He overcomes Balor through mastery of the winds, which cause wave swells, the howl of dragons, flashes of fire, and the light of both sun and moon. Thus driven back beneath the waves, the crops are secured for human use. There are a number of variations to the theme depending on the area, and as all mythology, it is ultimately local. Just as Zeus was thought as having different parents and with different myths from region to region, the same is true of Lu and Lughnasa. But the common theme is shared. Lu, sometimes with helpful sidekicks, combats the underworld forces and gains control over the earth and its produce. In Teltown, this was associated with Taltu, who is said to be the foster mother of Lu, and is made to be a very sorrowful event there. In Leinster, it is associated with a goddess called Carmen and her 3 sons who are killing the crops. Lu defeats them. Then, in an interesting twist, he captures the goddess, locks her in a cage, and has Bress bury her in the earth, which Lu then seals beneath strong oak trees, in order to force her into generating the produce. It is also possible that the goddess Macha was part of this tradition as well. In all cases, the female earth goddess dies. Lu is made king, and festive games and sacrifices are made, most certainly in honor of the goddess. Cuchulainn claims that the mound of Usnach was made from the leftovers of the party held to console Lu. The notion of Lu taking control over the land, taking ownership of it either through love or force, is likely the origin of one of his titles, Anagat, which means the harness of the goddess Anna, a goddess of the earth from which the name the Paps of Anu come from, and she may be equatable to Danu by that speculation. The Corlach head is almost certainly Lu. A local tradition regarding this figure, or one like it, says that the idol was buried up to its head around the time of Lughnasa. A similar story is actually told about Cuchulainn. When he confronts Curoi buries him up to his armpits, cuts off his hair, and smears his head with cow dung, all of which seems like a reenactment of planting, harvesting, and fertilizing. Another folk tradition says that a stone head was brought up from the sanctuary to be mounted atop a hill during Lughnasa. This seems very likely to be a reenactment of Lu, who stands atop a high place and watches over the land vigilantly, like a scarecrow. Another reason Lu is probably linked to the crow or raven was as its slayer. The god of an animal is also usually the slayer of that animal, and Cuchulainn is often slaying crows as they threaten the crops. Lu, as guarantor of the harvest, has a role played likewise by Mithra in Persian tradition and Indra in Vedic tradition. Indra was called, for instance, the Lord of Barley. He has a very close connection with plants and trees, and perhaps especially apples and acorns. However, not all would have been roses, and sometimes the crops failed, were blighted, and people starved. As we see in other pagan traditions, the gods associated with protecting crops are also quite often the ones who can destroy them when they are displeased. This applies directly to Apollo in Greek myth, who was a healer and one who brought the plague. This applies to Hermes, who was a protector of the home, but also a patron of thieves. There is an auspicious side and an inauspicious side to every god, represented in Cuchulainn by his fits of rage, in which his divine beauty, likely representing fine, nice, sunny, calm weather, turns into ugliness, and he will smite down anyone around him if not averted through his special geis, such as naked women. And of course his ugly side is almost certainly reflective of dark, stormy weather. Nudity was often thought to turn away the evil eye, which is why it's featured a great deal on Roman objects, especially lanterns, which were a huge fire hazard and could burn down one's home. When Cuchulainn gets into fits, he cannot stand to see nudity, and the evil eye must be turned away, and his anger cooled. Lughnasa is a celebration or an anticipation of all that is to come, to give thanks in advance, and was likely traditionally accompanied by large public sacrifices in order to express gratitude to Lu for ensuring the harvest, and for the goddess for providing up her bounty from the earth. It was a time also of marriages, likely following in the footsteps of Lu, for some sources also say that Lughnasa was his wedding ceremony. This may have involved the couple joining hands through a stone with a hole through it. Such stones were symbols of Lu's power to penetrate the stone, liberate waters, and fertilize the earth, as was the power of his spear. We see a connection between standing stones and Lu, equivalent perhaps to Hermes, stone pillars related to Hermes in ancient Greece. Say casts a spear straight through a stone to kill Gronu Pebber, and Cuchulainn likewise casts the Gai Bulga at Ferdiad, breaking through his armor and a stone. To be king, one must hold this sovereignty, and this is likewise for the gods, but there is also a strong connection between sovereignty and the sun, which goes overlooked. When the legendary Lughnasadh sought to become king, he had to sleep with an old ugly woman, yet she revealed to him her true appearance after he agreed to sleep with her, and it was said that she was like the sun in May. This goddess is likened to the ever-changing sun, which is weak and feeble and old in the winter, but bright and beautiful and warm in spring and summer. The sun, as the literal embodied physical object in the sky, was seen as being feminine. Many of the powers, however, associated with the sun, such as light, such as heat, and so on, may not have been thought of as being feminine. In turn, she likely reflects the life cycle of the world itself. She calls herself the sovereignty of Ireland, but this figure is distinct from the sovereignty goddesses of the land and soil represented by Eru, Banba, and Fodla, who are the wives of Bres, Lu's opposite. Instead, the sovereignty goddess related to Lu is the utmost sovereignty, the holy sovereignty of the sun, which the king weds and embodies. Great kings wore massive golden emblems on them, which were likely representative of the sun. Cuchulainn wears a cloak pin, which is said to be so bright that no man could look upon it with his eyes. This is the sun. He is not the sun, but he commands the sun, takes possession of the sun, and travels in its closest proximity, just as the star of Mercury or Hermes. Kings of Tara were said to rise before the sun, to embody Lu, who brought the sun. Conara, the high king, became a king through a vision obtained from a bull sacrifice, that the one who should be king was the one they would find wandering naked with a sling in his hand at dawn. This can only have been the classical image of Lu, caster of the stone, winner of dawn. He slays Balor with a sling stone, just as Cuchulainn is represented often using the sling to deadly effect, like Apollo. For the classical ranged weapon of the Celts was not the bow, but was the sling. The sling in ancient times was in fact a more effective battlefield weapon, with a much greater range. Lu ensures the harvest, the bounty of the earth which has raised him. The death of the goddess is part of the cyclical agricultural cycle, and is akin to the story of Demeter and Persephone from the Greek tradition, in which Hermes also plays a very important role. The timing is different in Greece because the agricultural cycle is different, but the meaning behind the festival is likely very similar. In addition, August is the celebration of the Olympic Games, said to commemorate Zeus's defeat of Kronos and his rise to kingship. The timing and similarity is not likely to be accidental, but shares a common origin. Thus, Lughnasa is more than just an agricultural holiday, but is symbolic of many, many things. The decline of the sun, the kingship of Lu, the harnessing of the goddess of the earth, and her death, the sun moving into the sign of Leo. It is a time of the barley harvest and of apples and acorns late in the month, of great festivals and competitive games. Lu rules as lord of wealth and prosperity, and all the bounty of the earth he calls his own, for he tells Balor, "From me, Lugh, do not plunder." The festival also has a recorded strange occurrence. Apparently in the time of Murrow's son, Donal, sometime in the Middle Ages, though I'm not exactly sure the date, over the festival of Taltiu, there was seen 3 ships that navigated through the air over the heads of the people of the festival. Lugh is connected with ships in both Welsh and Irish myth, and this tale would seem to confirm that indeed he was thought to traverse the sky in a ship, at least at times. This is a sky also imagined as a kind of sea upon which boats can travel, floating like clouds or like the sun and moon. Lugh's horse, which can also travel over land and sea, is likewise a flying horse, or even a kind of hippocampus. This was either an actual manifestation of the god, or an epiphany, or simply clouds that had taken on a very uncanny form of ships. In either event, it must have been one spectacular day at the festival. We will close with 2 poetic references to Lu, one from the Second Battle of Moytura, and the other from an invocation of Amergin in the Laur Gavala Éireann. May the flood of the sea inundate so that ye move. Lugh's mind is a sword for the druid. Swiftness of wind, howling of dragons, showers of fire, sternness of lions, shining of sun, radiance of moon. I am wind on sea, ploughing depths. I am ocean wave. I am roar of sea. I am a stag of 7 antlers. I am a hawk on a cliff. I am a sundrop. I am fine weather. I am a boar for battle ardor. I am a salmon in a pool. I am a lake on a plain. I am poetically inspired speech. I am a word of skill. I am the point of a spear that pours forth combat. I am a god who fashions sense for the head. Who smooths the ruggedness of a mountain? Who is he who announces the ages of the moon? And who the place where the sun sets? Who calls the cattle from the house of Tara? On whom do the cattle of Tethra smile? Who is Covenant? Who the god who fashions sharp edges in a citadel of tumor? Enchantments about a spear, enchantments of wind. I am. I'd like to give a big thanks to my Patreon subscribers. Tapalev Ersoneishjak, Agus Marasavisht, Shes Ard.